Let's imagine a scenario where a troubled little girl gets cast aside on her own for the first time at 10, and she's all alone. She can't go home. She has nowhere to turn. As an escape, she daydreams about meeting the perfect boy. At 12, he magically appears in her life and seems to be the answer to all her prayers. He treats her like a real grown-up. The little girl feels safe with him, and he lets her do whatever she wants. So she tastes freedom for the first time in her life. Suddenly, she's having a baby. That little girl is Valentina Duck, the mother of Tina Fontaine. And the boy is really a 23-year-old man. Welcome to my channel. Let's suppose that we can go back to a time where a little girl who people call Duck, she meets the man of her dreams. And that little girl has been on her own since she was 10 years old. And that is when she was permanently removed from her mom's care by family services. And so Duck was 10. She turned 12. And then she met the man of her dreams. That man was 24. But now, she's very safe and she's very secure in the arms of her 24-year-old boyfriend. Suddenly, she's having a baby. Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel and to another episode of Missing Kids, still discussing the case of Tina Fontaine. And I don't know if you remember our first episode. We began with our discussion of Valentina Duck, who was Tina's mom. Now, I'm going to review just a little bit of Valentina's life before we move on to Tina, and I'm going to keep this again, hopefully very brief, because I'm sorry about the last episode about context and all that negative stuff about the government and family services, but it really is essential to understand the turmoil that this country is in, regardless of whether or not the institutions are aware of it. It's highly likely that after a while, when things die down, people stop caring again. And so we need to keep the realistic situation in front of us if we want to, first of all, instigate change. And second of all, change ourselves. I think we really have to start looking at ourselves first before we can actually change anything around us. So that's sometimes pretty hard to do. So, as I just mentioned, Duck was moved around repeatedly after she was officially and permanently removed from her mother's care. And at that age, between 10 and 12 especially, she was heavily exploited by the use of alcohol, maybe prescription drugs, I'm not sure, and street drugs. And although this country is seeing more and more of that sort of abuse, it's not altogether very typical of a 10 or 12-year-old child. So even though Family Services did intervene to remove Duck from her family home, I'm not sure if it was an altogether stable family home, but little was done after that to intervene and protect little Duck. And so that would have been the Manitoba Advocate for Children and Youth, who finally decided to look into this a while later. There you have it. When Tina's parents did meet, little Duck was 12 years old, and the father of Tina, a 23-year-old, 24-year-old man. And so Child and Family Services records did show that the relationship was entirely inappropriate and that Tina's father had a very violent past that included severe addictions, probably to alcohol and drugs as well. So Valentina, or Duck, was also a very high-risk child because she repeatedly ran away. And so she ran away from her foster families in order to stay with her boyfriend, Tina's father. And in 1994, Duck described feeling depressed, suicidal, isolated, alone, unloved, and very most certainly displaced. And so actually what I'm describing is quite typical of children who are removed from their families for whatever reason, and how they continue in this endless cycle of hopelessness and sadness. And so ultimately, little Duck became pregnant and lost her first child. I don't know the circumstances under which that occurred. I don't know if it was a miscarriage or stillbirth. I don't know anything about that. And so I believe the child was actually born and experienced some misfortune right after that. Then Tina came along, and she was born on New Year's Day in 1999, Winnipeg, Manitoba. And so therefore, she was little Duck's second child. And in June, Duck gave birth to another baby. So guys, when Tina was 1 year old, she was removed from her family's care for the first time by Child and Family Services. It happened again when she was 2, and after which she was returned to the care of her dad. And so when Tina was 5, her father placed her and her younger sibling with her great aunt and uncle, Thelma and Joseph, through a private guardianship arrangement. Well, I'm kind of glad to hear that, but I'm not too sure how things panned out after that. Tina lived with her great aunt and uncle, Thelma and Joseph, for nearly a decade. And so that would bring her to about 15 years old. And they lived in Power View, Pine Falls, Manitoba, near Saking First Nation, except for a very brief period. Sadly and tragically, and in 2011, at 12 years old, so this would have been right around the time that she was still living with Thelma and Joseph. Her father, then 41 years old, was abruptly beaten to death. It was a very violent beating, and his assailants were both convicted for manslaughter. And despite being very eligible, she did not receive grief counseling following her father's murder. Throughout this troubled period in her early teens, Thelma and Joseph repeatedly asked family services for help, and they did not receive it. I don't know if that was because they were not following the guidelines, the required guidelines to a T. I don't know why they were turned down. Maybe it was because of Tina's troubled past. That shouldn't have been a factor, though. So I'm not sure that I'm at all clear on what exactly family services was really all about. So guys, I think I'm going to stop right here and finish off this third part, because next time we will probably get into more of the situation involving her disappearances and her ultimate discovery transpired. And so I think I want to leave that for next time. So anyway, I hope that you have enjoyed listening, and I hope that you consider subscribing. And please don't forget to tune in for the continuation of the story of Tina Fontaine. Bye!